This is the Fair Fight Initiative podcast. I'm Linda Franks, the Executive Director of the Fair Fight Initiative in Baton Rouge.
And I'm Dave Cartoonen of the Fair Fight Initiative in Boston.
Hello, handsome. How are you doing today?
Hello, beautiful. It's Monday.
It is, isn't it?
But we're still smiling.
I know. Welcome, everyone. Look, Dave. Okay. Look, stop me. Okay. If you've heard this before, right? So in North Carolina, North Kakalaki, right?
Kenly.
Yeah, Kenly. I think
not a big town.
Very small town. What about 15?
Not a big town.
People somewhere around
Maybe.
there? Maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they have a new Black female manager, city manager in Kenly, North Carolina. Progressive. I'm just amazed, right? How come the entire, okay, not just one or two, but the entire police force has resigned?
All at once.
All at once, including, I think, two of the clerks as well, is it?
Well, now let me just white mansplain something really close. It's very important that we have a thorough investigation here, Linda, and we get to the bottom of all the facts of what's really going on, because anytime 8 white police officers all resign at once, we need to give them, the due diligence and the respect that they deserve to make sure that everything was happened, taken care of, words, right?
Of course, there had to be extenuating circumstances, and of course we don't know exactly what are the merits of the reasons.
That is a fair thing to say.
Okay,
that's a fair thing to say.
But I just I gander a let me just pose a theory to you. Okay, let's just say that, as always, and I'm being generous here when I say always, because it's almost always, when there is someone in color who is put into a position of power, there's some backlash. There's some white backlash, and we just got to be honest about that. Certain segments of our society do not like being told what to do by people who they feel should not be in a position to tell them what to do, let alone a Black woman in Kenly, North Carolina. I can just imagine.
Well, the officers said, when they all resigned at the same time, that it was a hostile work environment, which is just rich, right? I mean, it is just rich. Yeah. First off, they only gave her 2 months. No reasonable person, I think, could expect that a hostile work environment would develop so quickly in 2 months that an entire white, and they were all white, police department would resign all at once. But the hostile work environment thing is always very interesting to me, because whenever a marginalized person is really marginalized and really harassed and, really driven to the edges, I think about like Anita Hill or just you name them, right? You say hostile work environment, and the white institutions say snowflake. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So does that make these 8 white male police officers snowflakes? I'm confused.
I wonder. Yeah, snowflakes, right?
Because we're always told to buck up, or, these are the rules of the road, or
we're gaslit into saying it wasn't what you thought it was. And,
yes.
You were misinterpreting, this and that and a third, But I know that, from what I saw in the report, some of the residents there were talking about how they are targeted, how the Black community in that area feels unsafe with their own policing agency. And I just wonder if this, woman is coming in and trying to really enact some good policies that, for all intents and purposes will increase, community confidence in the police department and probably help. But now all of a sudden you can't tell me to do this. I'm doing my job. Now you're trying to change what I'm, I mean, and it's the same old story. I mean, for real.
It is that police departments and the way that law enforcement has evolved in this country is that we are here to enforce accountability, and no one may hold us accountable.
Exactly.
Ever, right? This is an objective fact that I will be watching closely, and we're going to file this one away. I think there's update material with this story.
There's something to come from it.
Here is an objective fact about this story that we could know right now, and that someone could tell us. And I would encourage all of the reporters, fanning out in Kenly, North Carolina, which we know is not happening because small town news has just dried up, and this is probably a news desert, and why this story probably didn't get the attention it deserved. But an objective fact we could know tomorrow, if someone looked into it, was how many of these police officers live in Kenly, North Carolina. Because the other dynamic is always, like Ferguson, you have an entire police department who lives somewhere else, and they come to this town and they treat the residents like quarry.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it parallels all over, because I can see that here where I am in Baton Rouge. A lot of the police officers, they'll live in Livingston Parish, different parishes, and they come here. And, even the chief here has been getting a lot of backlash for things that he has been trying to clean up. This corrupt police.
Yep.
This corrupt police department here in Baton Rouge, and it's just really been amazing. But it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. I love her professionalism, in that it is a personnel situation. Sure. She's not really wanting to dig into it, but I know behind closed doors.
Well, there are good liability reasons not to get into personnel matters, and I can respect those things. But there are objective things that we can know right now that might give us a little hint on what the dynamics are.
I wonder what would happen if she hired 8 Black people to fill those spaces.
Let's talk about that in a second. I got one for you, Linda. Stop me if you've heard this before.
Okay.
But we want to reintroduce you to somebody who you've probably known for going on some years now, but maybe hasn't registered in the front of the consciousness. And that is Anthony Guglielmi.
Yeah, say it.
And he is the spokesperson for the United States Secret Service, who has seemed to have come under a little bit of fire lately because all of their text messages from all of the people that were close to the president on January 6th vanished, Oh, but there's an explanation, because Mr. Guglielmi is paid lots of money, and I'll get a little bit deeper into this after Linda registers her opinion, to provide an explanation for how this happened. Of course, the Secret Service, we were just in the process of a regular replacement of devices when these text messages mysteriously vanished. No, that makes no sense. And here's why. Because those text messages are a federal record, and every single record must be preserved. So no matter when or how you are replacing devices in the United Secret Services, and you already knew, that those records need to be kept. So that explanation holds no water. But when you have a professional liar in place near the top of the Secret Service to create narratives around criminal activity, you bring in somebody like Anthony Guglielmi, who, before being the spokesperson for the United States Secret Service, was the spokesperson for the Chicago Police Department during the Laquan McDonald murder. If you recall, McDonald was shot 16 times by Jason Van Dyke, who started shooting at McDonald 6 seconds after he got out of his patrol car while McDonald was walking away. And we heard all of these terrible stories about how a 16-year-old black boy was, of course, a man, because they're always elevated to a man.
That's right.
And what a menace and a thug he was, and how he was swinging knives. And guess who was behind all of those false narratives? This person is a professional propagandist. They create narratives to justify unjust things in law enforcement. Yeah. And here he is again, right at the fore of another gross injustice, Linda.
And just think about it, because they are law enforcement, because they are cops, right? They can come up with these almost futuristic science fiction type explanations to explain something that should be common sense, right? Like you said.
And they're taken as gospel. That's right.
It must never be true. Question. They have to be telling the truth. As opposed to, like you were talking about with Laquan McDonald, the evidence that's right in front of your face, right? This 16-year-old, come on, really? I'm pretty sure part of your training, part of all federal employees' training, has got to be the document trail, right? Oh, yeah. That's got to be driven into you in your orientation period, right? Because any federal document is subject to being, it has to be preserved, because it can be called upon at any time, and it belongs to us as a nation. We need to know, and at some particular time, these documents may be released, however heavily redacted, but they can be released. And there has to be a preservation of history for history's sake, right?
Right.
So, and you are in the Secret Service. That gives a different connotation to the word secret
It
in
sure
Secret
does,
Service,
doesn't it?
right? This professional liar. I think you were telling me about something else that he was involved in, conjuring up some nice a narrative shifting and changing.
Well, yeah, Smollett all happened in Chicago, and he was found guilty and had his own issues, but it didn't require false narrative creation,
Exactly.
and this happens in, I don't want to say every police department, but consistently in police departments all across the country. And I walked these shoes as a reporter, and frankly, January 6th is starting to create an inflection point for journalists. Like, how many single source police stories have reporters done where they simply took the spokesman's word and repeated it as truth? And it happens over and over again with police involved shootings, with lost records, with all these things. Journalists are starting to have a reckoning around January 6th, but it's something that I also call the portable video inflection point, right? It happened earlier for politicians. And in the 2000s, when YouTube came of age and trackers were following politicians with small cameras and reproducing everything that they had said, politicians realized, I can't speak out of both sides of my mouth like I used to be able to.
Right.
I can't say one thing to one constituency and not have another constituency not see it, right? They still talk out of both sides of their mouth. I'm not apologizing their behavior, but they've had to change their game. Law enforcement is only beginning to reckon with this because of body cameras and other things. The old playbook where some suspect or thug or 16-year-old man, as they like to describe him, made a sudden move and we had to shoot him, it doesn't play anymore.
That's right.
Because the body camera is changing that.
Right.
And so now they're fighting the body cameras and trying to hide the evidence and try and suppress because they got nothing left, right? I mean, look at Uvalde, right? I mean, they fought and they fought and they fought and they fought. Right?
Yeah.
They're going to have a reckoning with that.
Yeah.
And these professional liars are still using old playbooks where video just dispels everything that they've said. And it will again in this case. And some of these Secret Service agents have already lawyered up, which is always a sign of transparency and wanting to be on the same team to get to the bottom of things, right?
Yeah.
When law enforcement officers have to get their own private lawyers, they're playing on their own team.
This is what I'm talking about. And I think that, as a country, we've got to come to that, right? We are going to have, for checks and balances to really work, these people who have been given this just unlimited opportunity to be able to say whatever they want to say, and it is just taken at face value, has to be challenged. Because I'm telling you, when it comes to confidence now, community, the public at large has no confidence. They're being shown to be a liar over and over and over again. And once that confidence is completely eroded, what do you have left but, hopefully not what we've seen on January the 6th.
Well, and in local communities, what the cycle has proven to us is when local communities lose faith in their law enforcement, they take matters into their own hands and crime goes up.
That's it.
Well, Linda, this provides us an educational perspective on not only how people can learn more about these types of issues, but how they can also go to the Fair Fight website to learn about them. And the topic that this ties through, and you may not see it right away, of course, is the Defund the Police movement. And if you go to fairfightinitiative.com, right at the top, there's an education tab. You can go down to the Defund the Police movement to read more about it. But the first thing we should say is that defund the police is a terrible bit of messaging, right? When people hear defund the police, they hear, oh, whoa, we're just going to let the criminals run free? Of course not. So let's talk about justice reinvestment instead. But when you say defund the police, I think that there are two unique opportunities in these two stories to describe really what justice reinvestment actually means. So in the case of Anthony Guglielmi, he is SES. And for people who don't know what that is, in the federal government, that stands for Senior Executive Service. This is an elite level of position in government where they're paid extremely well and they try to recruit the best and the brightest to come. These are people who are searching for weapons of mass destruction in the Department of Defense. And they're, tracking hurricanes for the National Weather Service. I mean, these are the best of the best. And we're trying to attract the best minds to government to help solve problems. What we're talking about here is the best of the best narrative creator, professional liar. Should federal taxpayers have to pay for someone to make up lies to defend Secret Service officers? That's what people mean by defund the police. They're not saying let criminals run free. They're saying maybe we should stop paying for professional liars.
Right, exactly. Maybe we can reinvest in things that we see now because of our history. We have the benefit of hindsight. we can stop operating in insanity, which means doing the same thing over and over again and getting a different, getting the same result. And I totally agree with what you're understanding about this defund the police, and it gets a bad rap because people are thinking, oh, we want to take all of the money away from the police and leave them out there to go run behind hardened criminals with sticks and stones. I mean, come on. What we're really talking about is restructuring, right? What we're talking about is really, really wise budgeting, really using our resources where they can do the most impact. And like you said, hiring in these people who we've seen are bad actors, right? Who are narrative shifters and downright liars. I don't think anyone would agree is a good use of our money. And it does nothing to foster public safety. In fact, it hinders public safety because, like you said, once the community, in communities that really, really lack the confidence in the people that are there to quote unquote protect and serve them, then I mean, we're open for all types of mayhem to occur. I had one person to say in an interaction with the law enforcement officer, I thought you were here to protect and serve me, not to harass and oppress me. Right. And so that's the kind of thing that we need to make sure that when we're investing in police, the proper training on how to make sure that they are interacting with citizens in the way that we deserve to be. And if they can't, then we have other resources in the community that can supplement and circumvent what they have to do,
And so now we have this unique justice reinvestment opportunity in Kenly, North Carolina. There is no police department in Kenly, North Carolina. So why not have the town committee consider whether funds would be better used to hire crisis interventionists when there are mental health episodes instead of police officers with guns, right? Maybe there is better budgeting around hiring social workers for certain things rather than having a guy with a gun show up. There is another community, unfortunately, who has had to reckon with this recently in Uvalde, Texas, where 375 heavily armed law enforcement officers stood for an hour while children were slaughtered. Was that a good allocation of money to buy tanks and ballistic shields? Or would policy make better sense? And banning assault rifles not only protect children in schools, but eliminate the need to buy tanks and high-velocity ballistic shields that 375 police officers chose not to use.
Exactly.
So when you talk about defund the police, this is what we mean. You can learn more about it and read our white paper about defunding the police, about justice reinvestment on fairfightinitiative.com.
And we encourage you to do so. We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said that. And despite the finite disappointments of the stories that we share on the Fair Fight Initiative podcast, we must maintain infinite hope that we can end it.
And certainly an example this week is the life of Bill Russell, who passed away Sunday night at the age of 88 after not only winning 11 NBA championships in 13 years, not only winning 2 national championships for the University of San Francisco, not only winning a gold medal for our country in the Olympics, but maybe most importantly, he didn't, as the right-wing pundits would like to say, just shut up and dribble. Linda.
Amen. It's such an amazing example of an athlete using his platform to do good. Bill Russell was an amazing civil rights icon in our community. President Barack Obama awarded him the Medal of Freedom. And it's so well deserved. Here's a man that participated in the first noted, get this now, game boycott in 1961 in Lexington, Kentucky, because 2 of his teammates were denied the opportunity to eat and at the restaurant. I mean, and one of the things that, I would say when he found out that happened, look, they went to Red Auerbach and they said, look, this is going on. And even though they were given the opportunity to go in after, I'm sure, Red Auerbach was saying some serious stuff, to those people. They were like, you know what? We're not playing the game. We're not going to do it, And in 1961,
and vilified for it. And
Yes, indeed.
vilified
I
for it.
mean, you got
I
to
mean,
understand, lynchings were quite still going on regularly during that
no,
time.
absolutely. And it's easy to pin these things on communities like Lexington, Kentucky. But
Hmm.
lest we forget, Bill Russell played for the Boston
Boston
Celtics.
Celtics.
This is my community. And at that time, and still today, remains a deeply segregated, sometimes latently racist community. And I'm not afraid to say it. Boston had extraordinary relationships with its white sports stars, Bobby Orr and Tom Brady. And Ted Williams had his moments. He got a hard time from Boston at times. But Bill Russell had an aloof, arm's length relationship with Boston pretty much from the day he left going forward. And that thawed over time. But Boston was extremely hard on Bill Russell, and not in the same way that his white contemporaries were treated. Bob Cousy and John Havlicek and all of them. And he was the reason for their success. So, lest we forget that maybe lynchings were still happening in the Deep South, but it was, racism was alive and well in different ways in Boston
Goodness. I'm
in the
not to say that he
1960s
couldn't have
when
gotten
Bill
lynched
Russell, absolutely,
in Boston as well.
and
Understand? I
he
mean, two
spoke
years
up.
after that game, right? He was
Yep.
supporting the black kids in the school boycott in Boston,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So there's
Yep.
so many things that Bill Russell, and he was not afraid to look. Say, I'll walk away from basketball.
Yep.
I'll walk away from this. I will not sell my soul.
Nope.
When I see something is wrong, God has put me here for a reason, and I'm going to speak out for it. He was at the March on Washington,
Yes,
standing beside Dr. Martin Luther King when he gave his speech, that amazing speech that we all continue to lift up as the iconic, civil rights speech. He supported Muhammad Ali. He was one of the, athletes that stood up in support when Muhammad Ali was being just lambasted for changing his name and not wanting to participate in the war. Bill Russell has always, and I think behind the scenes, a lot of things have always encouraged athletes to speak your truth and to not be, like you said, just dribble and shut up.
Yep.
But this is an amazing opportunity that you have been given, and I'm not talking about given by white people, but I mean by given by the fact that God has blessed you to be, in such physical condition that you can participate at a certain level that affords you this type of exposure. And you have an obligation, whether you meet it or not. I mean, and even think about, there's an iconic picture of him on his Instagram, right? Where he's kneeling and he's got the Medal of Freedom around his neck and he's kneeling and he's standing in solidarity with those NFL players who are choosing to take a knee. I mean, even then, he still had his hand right there. And I'm sure he's mentored so many athletes that have come across his and supported so many athletes in their quest for that.
Just as you say that, Bill Russell's legacy will live on, right? If you care about what Colin Kaepernick has done in football, if you care about the way that LeBron James continues to speak out for social justice and things like this, it started with people like Jim Brown and Bill Russell. And in baseball with Jackie Robinson.
Amen.
And Bill Russell's legacy will live on. He has provided a rubric that basketball players in particular, like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who has done such a wonderful job with social justice, to the detriment of his heroic records in basketball. Kareem is not held up in the same way that Magic is held up in these fairy tale characters, because they speak their minds. And we're better because of it.
Amen.
And may he rest in peace.
May he rest in warrior. May you rest in power. Glory to God. Yes, indeed. And it's people like Bill that inspire us to do better, to give where we can. And that's why I want to, again, urge you to visit our website, verifiedinitiative.org. We have just gone to amazing links to make sure that we are educating our community on systemic racism and injustice and this system that has oppressed so many people in our United States of America. But we also want to encourage you to give. That is a way that you can do your part. No matter how small your donation, it is definitely going to be used towards righting some of these wrongs and leveling the playing field. And as I will always say from personal experience, I know the benefit of it. I know what it can do to change a life and to change the trajectory of of going through such a hard time. So I just want to encourage you to not only visit our website, but to push that donate button.
That is fairfightinitiative.com. You can click the donate button and you can read about topics like defunding the police and educate yourself on these issues of systemic racism and learn about the success stories we've had in the courts by hiring attorneys to try to level and balance the scales of justice. The Fair Fight Initiative podcast is a production of the Fair Fight Initiative.
Founded in 2017, the Fair Fight Initiative is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to crowdsourcing litigation which advocates for equal treatment under the law and confronts systemic racism.
We believe that justice crowdsourced is justice delivered.
Crowdsourcing resources from our contributors, we're able to finance the litigation no attorneys will take because of the overwhelming upfront cost to seek justice in our legal system.
And you can learn more about our mission and to contribute at fairfightinitiative.org.